Every person who cares about their health should be strength training. Now, when I state that based upon pretty objective and very large amounts of scientific evidence. And I'm not saying that a person can't be healthy without strength training. So I don't want someone to come in and say, but I know this person who's in perfect health at 90 years old and they've never touched a weight in their life. Okay, that's perfectly fine. You also probably have met someone who smoked cigarettes and lived to be 90 also. Well, my mother and then several other people who I know and loved were all killed by cigarettes at much, much younger ages. Okay? And the doctors confirmed at my own mother's autopsy that cigarettes were probably the primary contributor. Okay? So just because you have exceptions doesn't change the data. Doesn't change the data. So keep that in mind for people who want to jump up and find exceptions to these rules. It's really irrelevant. It doesn't change what we can measure. And the reason I say strength training specifically has to do not just with the muscle mass end, but the bone density end, and the fact that strength training tends to put more focus on the lower body. A lot of guys who only care about aesthetics don't train their lower body as much. Whereas then if you had to pick upper versus lower, if we cared about health and things like cancer and diabetes and heart disease, you would only train your lower body, right? Because that's the part that contributes the most to all of this. But obviously, if we're going to be intelligent about it, we want to train everything. So I'm only going to show lower body stuff in here because this is where we get the most bang for our buck, the larger structural exercises. So what do I mean by we should do this for our health? Cancer data is the first one that we should be looking at. If you go dig through the data, and people say, why don't you link studies? Because I've gotten strikes from YouTube before for linking studies. Number two, this stuff's all easy to find. This is not disputed or obscure data anymore. This is all readily available stuff that you'll be able to easily find. The data on cancer and weight training shows that people who strength train regularly, meaning at least twice a week, you don't have to train like I do, train twice a week, you automatically, when all other lifestyle factors are accounted for, seems to cut cancers of all types in half by 50%. You want to closest thing you're going to get to a cure for cancer, strength training is near the top of the list. So people saying, oh, we're looking for cures. Well, there's a big part of your cure. Prevention. We also know that people who get cancer survive treatment at double the rate of non-lifters, people who lift. I mean, that's pretty impressive by itself. If we had nothing else other than that, anyone with common sense would say, I should probably strength train, especially if you've lost a family member or loved one to cancer. You know something related to cancer possibly runs in your family at that point. What about diabetes? People who strength train develop diabetes at a 70% lower rate than people who do not. Notice I didn't say non-exercise, I just said versus people who do not. We're taking everyone else in the world, people who strength train. Doesn't matter if we're talking about non-strength trainers, whether they're athletes or athletic or fit, just as a single variable. Strength training and weightlifting reduces diabetes rates by 70%. Again, if you have a family member who's on insulin or diabetic, it runs in your family. Be a real good idea. Cardiovascular disease, the last meta-analysis comparing exercise types, I believe it was it in 2018? So it's, yeah, I think 2018. Meta-analysis compared cardiovascular disease and risk factors between different forms of exercise, and they found that strength training was actually slightly better for your cardiovascular health than cardio and endurance training was. It wasn't massively better, it was slightly better. So the take home was that if you could only do one, strength training would win. Now, incidentally, they found that they both had separate pathways by which they helped to some extent. So actually people who had the absolute best cardiovascular health tend to be people who do both. So I'm not telling you not to do any conditioning or cardio work, just pointing out that strength training was found to be the best form of exercise for your cardiovascular health by a very, very small margin. But obviously, if you really and truly were concerned with it, doing both would be the wiser choice. But if you have a time limitation or a time investment issue, the strength training should be your choice for that. Well, what about just general obesity and weight management? Well, people who lift need a lot more calories. Now, people will jump up and make goofy arguments about, well, we have this and that on lifting and muscle mass, and it's much lower than you think. You're looking at single variables. You're not looking at the overall TDEE of people who lift. And that matters a lot because people who lift and people who have lots of muscle have much higher NEATs. Okay? We have much, much higher NEATs. My maintenance calories are over 4,000 calories a day just to maintain weight. So just putting that in perspective. Okay, that's what I have to not lose weight. And granted, I'm not a particularly lean guy, but that's really besides the point. It doesn't change the math. And that's an extreme case. But I also have plenty of younger guys who I coach who have maintenance calories of 3,000 or more who are not over 200 pounds. I have guys who weigh 170, 180 who need 3,000 calories a day just to maintain. Okay? All right, it makes weight loss easier. Makes weight management and fat management easier for people who are concerned with those things in the long term, not the short term, but in the long term. And that's what we care about. All right, let's come to the big one about why the heavy weight matters. Bone density. Strength training improves bone density and bone mineral density more than anything else we have ever found. So if you're worried about osteoporosis and all these things, how many people out there take tons of supplements related to bone health? How many people? Tons. You ever looked at the bone density of any strength athlete or any serious lifter who lifts heavy? It's astronomically high. It is so many magnitudes higher than the average person could obtain using every supplement and drug known to man to increase bone density that it would blow your mind. And if you don't believe me, go look at my DEXA scans from 2018 and look at my bone mineral density. I was 4th standard deviation on the bell curve as a male in my 40s. And that's across the board. That's compared to even 20-year-olds. Right? Absurd bone density. Well, that's what osteoporosis is loss of bone minerals. That's what causes your hips to fracture. That's what causes frail bones in people as they get older. So in other words, people who strength train, if you were to ever strength train seriously like I do and maintain it, that means at 60 or 70, rather than having frail bones, I will have bones that are probably stronger than the average 20-year-old. Still at that point. Strength training, the amount of weight you load on your bones matters. In other words, this is where the really heavy weight and the low reps pays off on big exercises like squats and deadlifts, the bone density. And by the way, that bone density is the reason people get shorter with age. If you see people who are a little short, hunched over old people, that's lack of bone density in their spine, right? Demineralization of the spine. Strength training can almost entirely stop that. It will completely stop that from occurring. If you were to start strength training, say in your 30s even, and continue it all the way up into your 80s, you won't have that reduction in height and that little short old person disease that you see. That doesn't occur. You completely stop it. And we have examples out there. What about cognition, Alzheimer's, memory, leg strength, and actually grip strength to some extent? But leg strength, let's come back over, train your grip. Quit using straps, train your damn grip. Has been linked to better cognition past age 60. Leg strength was found to be one of the most important variables linked to best cognition, best memory, lowest rates of Alzheimer's, lowest rates of dementia. And it makes sense if you look at what strength training does to the body. If you look at what happens biochemically and to your blood work and everything else when you strength train, and you understand the factors involved with dementia and Alzheimer's, it absolutely makes sense. For the exact same reason that strength training reduces diabetes rates, it should reduce Alzheimer's rates. For the exact same biological reason. And it has to do with insulin sensitivity and insulin response in the body. Your muscles are one of the greatest sinks you could ever have for soaking up insulin and causing your body to produce smaller amounts of insulin in response to glucose. Strength training dominates that. So again, it changes all these things, and that matters. It matters a lot for stuff like memory, dementia, Alzheimer's, and the data on it is actually emerging, and it's looking pretty solid after the last few years. So when you look at all of these different factors, it should become very apparent that strength training itself is one of the best things you could possibly do for your health. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.